Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new game Dragon Age Inquisition, which is currently available for PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PC. Now, some history: I love Dragon Age. I probably played Origins maybe 13 times. I've beaten it to see all the different endings. I love that game. I also liked Dragon Age 2 because I felt like the combat was really fresh. It was fun to play, though there were a lot of things that made it a far inferior product to Dragon Age Origins. Now, it's been a few years. BioWare has spent some time with this game. They took their time, they put out a good product, and now I'm going to review it. Most of this review is going to be gameplay over my narration so that I can give you points, but really you want to see what the game is like. You get to see if it's something you might enjoy playing. So if you don't read my written blog, I cover reviews in basically 4 ways. I give you the gist, the basics of what the game is about. I tell you what worked, I tell you what didn't work, and then I give you an overall summary and a score. So if you're only interested in kind of the final summary, you want to jump around, the time marks are in the description below. So the basic gist of the game. We are in a fantasy world called Thedas. There are mages, which is a fancy word for wizard, kind of facing off against Templars, which is kind of this group of soldiers kind of run by the church. And they oppose each other, so in the other 2 Dragon Age games there were kind of this feud. Our game begins, and there is a peace talk summit that's about to happen. Some tragedy happens, kills a bunch of people, and it kills kind of the head of the church. So now the rest of the game is figuring out who did that, why did that happen, and trying to fix those wrongs. Inquisition is a role-playing game, which means you get to create a character. There's a lot of different races, options, kind of genders, whatever for you to choose. You create a character how you see fit, and then you roam around this big open world and get to make decisions as to how that world plays out. A lot of the game is combat driven, so you're fighting various people, monsters, things, but there's also a lot of strategy and making decisions and doing dialogue and choosing your response to different things to see how you react. So you could play this as a very good guy, make a lot of good logical decisions, or a very bad, impulsive character that kind of goes the more violent route, or a mixture of both. So when this tragedy happened, your character was there and was somehow saved by it. And so some people in this world will react to you like kind of God has chosen you, so you're kind of this chosen one character. But a lot of people also assume if you're the only person to survive, you might have had something to do with it. So a lot of the game is proving to people your intentions and using that power and prestige and infamy to your benefit, to help the world maybe. So when you're roaming around the world, it is you, your character, and then you get 3 party members that you get to choose out of a cast of about 9 or 10. So you get to choose what 3 you want to bring with you, what makes up a good team, who has really interesting dialogue together, who might pair well together. You get to choose. So what worked? The world that you're exploring is gigantic. There's about 10 areas, so it's like 10 open world games. It's not one big open world like Skyrim. This is 10 areas that are all pretty sizable. The first area that you come across, called the Hinterlands, is bigger than the entire Dragon Age Origins game. And there's 10 of them. So there's a lot of space to cover, there's a lot of things to do. It does feel a lot like Skyrim, that you get to kind of jump, you get to go over things, you get to kind of go off the path and kind of just see what's in this world. You might run across a cave, you might run across monsters that you wouldn't have otherwise unless you wandered into that corner of the world. It's very open for you to explore. This world is absolutely stunning. The game looks incredible, and each area is very different. So you might go from like the desert to this rainy coastal area, and they all look equally stunning. The diversity of the monsters that you face is also really well done. You know, there's kind of basic enemies, then there might be things like giants, which is kind of a new entry into the franchise, and then there's things like dragons, which are gigantic, require a lot of strategy, and they look gorgeous. There are thousands of side quests that you can do, which basically means they're optional, so they're not part of the main story, but they're there for you to do. And in most RPGs, these side quests might feel inconsequential. But here, they smartly make these side quests seem important. That even though you're doing something small, you know, you're clearing out a cave of bandits, or you heard there's some bad guys, so you're gonna go fight them. At the end of that, it ties back to your reputation, or you might save someone or do a favor for someone that now comes back to your base and works for you. They join the Inquisition. So there's little things that all add up to every side quest making you feel like you're making progress. Your Inquisition is getting stronger. It's all really well done. And every side quest has a little bit of character, something that makes it a little different. So it's not as repetitive as other role-playing games where it feels like every mission is kind of the same old thing. And while you're roaming around this world, your party members, your companions, talk to each other. And so they might also give you context into how what you're doing or what you just accomplished goes back to the bigger goal. You know, they might be talking amongst themselves and say, wow, I'm really glad we did that because this. So it really ties it all together and everything feels important. Now again, the game looks gorgeous, right? So in terms of locations, monsters, everything, even your character, you get to customize to look however you want. So mine, clearly I tried to make it look like me because that is awesome. Why wouldn't you do that? And then you have unique weapons. Everything looks great, especially in cutscenes that are made that you're not controlling, you're just watching, but it's your character kind of doing all these things and it looks awesome. It's cool to see your creation interacting and doing things on the screen. The combat is easy, right? You can play it like a button masher where you're just kind of hitting buttons, fighting, action-oriented, which is how I played most of it, which is more the style of Dragon Age 2. But you can also kind of pause, take a break, really look at each character where they are, put them in the right place. You can kind of micromanage to the point of, I want this character to be here and to do this to that character. So for harder battles, you might need to. I don't play games for the difficulty, so I kind of bump it on the easier side because I just want to enjoy it. But for those of you that want to play in this tactical mode, it's there. Now, in a big open world, it's important for you to be able to get around the map easily. So you have fast travel points where you can go from here to here instantly, right, which is really easy. But there's also the addition of mounts, right? So you might get a horse, something to travel around the world. And this is probably one of my favorite additions to the franchise. That not only do you get a horse, but you might get something like a lizard-like Dracolisk, where it's kind of like a dragon horse thing. You might get a battle nug, which is, nugs are kind of small vermin, but like left unchecked, they become these giant things and you can ride them around. But since my character is noble and nice, I choose a hart, which is like a kind of elk, stag kind of thing. It just looks majestic, and so as you travel around the game, you looks awesome. There's also a bunch of question marks that I still, like 90 hours into the game, have not discovered these other mounts. So either they're kind of just different colorations of the same thing, or there might be mounts that we just haven't discovered. And almost every day I'm online searching up and people have found them and nothing. So there might be some really cool things that people just haven't uncovered yet. But mounts is a really cool addition. It's something I really enjoy. The benefit to using mounts is that you can kind of skip things that maybe aren't fun. If there's like low-level combat that just kind of is getting tiresome, you can go right through it. But they can, if an enemy hits your mount, unseat you. So you kind of fall off your mount, runs away or whatever, and then you get to fight. But unless that happens, you can skip a lot of combat that maybe isn't enjoyable for you. The story for Inquisition, I think, is interesting. It's not super creative. It's the basic, you are the chosen one, you have some sort of power that no one understands, very similar to Skyrim, and you must use that power for good or evil. So in this case, you're able to close these rifts that are opening up and kind of letting these demon creatures out into the world, right? So throughout the game, you're kind of closing these rifts and stopping them from coming out. Now this is simple enough, but what makes this unique is there's something called the War Table, which is where you get to look at a big picture of all of your efforts as the Inquisition. And you get to see individual tasks, and you get to choose one of three ways to approach it. So you might see a task that's something like, you have a relative that's gossiping about you. How do you want to treat it? Do you want to send one assassin, take him out in the middle of the night, no one will ever see him again? Do you want to send some muscle, beat him up, send a message? Or maybe you send a messenger with some money and bribe him to be quiet. Each decision has different impacts. That you might anger someone that later wages war against you. Or you might win over someone that now shows up to your main base and wants to work for you. These happen in real time, so you might see a task, you set it, it takes you 12 minutes. So you go back to playing the game, 12 minutes later this little notification comes up, you've completed a task. Or they could be hours and hours. I had one that was like 36 hours or something. It was like crazy, or maybe like a day. So you can turn off your system, come back to it in a day, and it'll be done. But these little things give you that freedom to, how do I want to rule? What kind of decisions do I want to make? It's just really interesting, and it makes you feel like you're making important decisions. Beyond this, you also have your 9 companions with you. And you get to talk to them, engage with them. They have unique missions that if you get close enough to them might trigger that, hey, I need your help with this. And you go do something that maybe in other playthroughs you never saw or other players never experienced. You could also romance certain people, which I will let you explore for yourself. Now, there is a crafting system in the game, and I think it needs to be mentioned here. The crafting system allows you to create things like armors and weapons and maybe things that are required for a mission or things that you can upgrade your kind of base. The crafting system allows you to take all of this stuff that you're gathering, right? So as you're running around the world, you're like, oh, here's a thing, I'll take that. You kind of take all these things, and then you get to put them together kind of however you want. So when you're creating an armor, you get to look at all these ingredients you have and you say, maybe if I put this, this will happen, or it'll look different, it'll be a different color. It's very deep and complex, but really easy to use, which is a very fine balance. But I had a lot of fun. My most powerful armors and weapons were things that I created. So if you're playing the game and you really want kind of the best of the best, crafting is really the way to go. So now, what doesn't work? My complaints are all pretty minimal. I mean, in the big picture of things, not a lot is wrong with this game. One thing that I struggled with every once in a while was the inventory system. So you gather all these things, you get weapons, you get armors, you get all the stuff that you're kind of gathering, and you hit a limit where you can't take anything more. I upgraded my inventory completely, but I still, all the time, ran into, your inventory's full, sorry. And so now in the middle of an important mission, you have to go back somewhere and sell all this stuff, and then you're like, okay, now we can get back to the action. And I sold everything except what I was wearing. So the inventory system is not super useful, it's more of a deterrent. I do appreciate some games just have unlimited inventory, right? Just take whatever. I kind of appreciate that because it doesn't ruin the flow of these missions. So that is something I struggled with. You're also going to run into a lot of loading screens as you're traveling around these different areas. The loading screens do something really cool, where they give you kind of 3 options of things you want to read about. So here's some history, or here's a tip. But the downside is that some of these really interesting options are pretty extensive, and that screen is going to appear for maybe 5 seconds. So you're going to see this really long story, and you're like, oh, this might be interesting, and then it's gone. And you get this black loading screen with nothing but a little flashing icon that sits on screen for another 20 seconds before your mission starts. So I like the idea of incorporating some history and lore, but then it kind of hits you in the face with, oh, you wanted to read that, sorry. And there's no way to kind of go back to that. So it was a good idea, but implemented really poorly. Lastly, there were a few missions that were almost impossible to complete, that the directions were really unclear, that I had no idea where to go. There weren't any mission markers to tell me anything. There was a ball, like a masquerade ball that kind of happened, and you're kind of interviewing people and trying to eavesdrop, and kind of, it was all political. I had no idea what was going on in that section. That it was like, hey, go do this, and you're like, I don't even know who that is or what's going on. So there were a few that were kind of like, you're in the right area, and you're like, where do I look? And maybe I'm used to being handheld, that it's like, hey, go to this place and do this thing. And I'm like, you got it. So some of these were a little less forgiving, and it was a little jarring compared to the rest of the game. But that was a small amount of missions, and in the big picture did not irritate me at all. So overall, you can tell from my massive amount of positive things about this game that I loved it. It took me about 90 hours, and I don't regret a thing. I'm already thinking about multiple other playthroughs and how I would do things differently. So if you want a game that gives you tons of content, and you enjoy every single minute of it, this is an easy choice. Well worth the money to buy this game. The game is mostly polished. There's just a few glitches, a few missions that are kind of written weirdly, but most of the game is fun. The combat is enjoyable, it's simple, but it gives you that tactical option if you want it. The The writing is stellar, the characters are probably more interesting than either of the other Dragon Age games. The war table, getting to choose kind of how your war plays out, it's all fascinating. It all contributes to an amazing game. I had incredible expectations. That after a few years of waiting for this, I thought there was no way this game could meet them, and it blew me out of the water. So absolutely, out of a 5-point scale, 5 out of 5, I loved it. I would encourage it to anyone that likes this type of world. So Lord of the Rings, fantasy, kind of anything like that, you're okay with that world, and you just want to sink a lot of time into a really great story and have a blast, Dragon Age Inquisition is a no-brainer. And again, it's currently available on PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PC, so you have no reason to not play it. If you haven't been over to my full website, check out I'mYourTargetDemographic.com for a lot of written reviews, a lot of movie reviews, video game stuff, all sorts of content there, so go check that out, and thank you for watching.